evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight, and greetings from California. We're coming to you live this evening from the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda outside Los Angeles. We'll see if you remember hearing this story at any point before. A caravan of impoverished migrants is now making its way up from Central America through Mexico. Their plan is to present themselves at our southern border and demand entry into our country with all the benefits, of course, that entails. The White House has vowed to stop this caravan using the armed forces if necessary, but it keeps coming. Have you heard something like that before? Well, in fact, you have. Something very similar happened just a few months ago. We watched another migrant caravan snake its way up from Central America. It finally arrived, and then the news coverage essentially stopped. But what happened next? Well, here's what happened next. Hundreds of those people in that caravan are still here in the U.S. And if recent history is any guide at all, very few of them will ever leave. Once you reach this country and claim asylum, you're usually home free. Our media don't often cover that, but the rest of the world is watching and knows it very well. And that's why they keep coming. The most recent estimates suggest that a caravan's worth of uninvited migrants arrives at our border every few days. Why is this happening? Because an entire political party is inviting it and encouraging it. They believe unchecked immigration will strengthen their hold on power. They're perfectly aware that you don't like this, but they don't care. Just yesterday, Nancy Pelosi said it would be, quote, immoral to build a wall that might stop poor people from flooding into this country. Watch.
We have to do something other than building a wall, which you characterize very well. In my view, it's immoral, expensive, ineffective, and not something that people do between countries.
Did you catch that? Securing the border is just, quote, not something people do. Not something decent people do anyway. Bigots do it. So do moral reprobates and anyone else who derives pleasure from cruelty. As MSNBC explained just today, borders are a lot like slavery or the Trail of Tears. Watch.
This is a moral outrage that harkens to the worst excesses in the history of the country, to the separation of families at the slave auction blocks,
yes,
to the separation of Native American families. It is a moral
and Laura
outrage.
Bush said, I love you. I really do. I'd like to move next door to you and have coffee.
They're morally outraged. Well, they're always morally outraged, and the point of their moral outrage is pretty clear. America has no right to decide who lives within its borders. Americans lack the moral standing to make that decision. We are too sinful. Illegal immigrants come here because we deserve it. We meddled in their wars in the 1980s. We had the gall to get addicted to the drugs they send us. We once had segregation in the American South. Whatever, the point is this is a fallen country. 22 million illegals within our borders is just the beginning of our penance. Latin America is listening to all of this, and they are getting the message, and that's why they're on their way. Last fiscal year, 94,000 families from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador were detained at the U.S. border. Not one of these people had a right to come in, but they were not deported. Almost 100% of them are still here, and most will never leave. We are powerless in the face of this. Congress could fix it, but Congress refuses to fix it. The system is broken by design. Voters know this, of course. It's one of the main reasons they voted for Donald Trump 2 years ago. They don't hate immigrants, obviously, but they do believe America has a right to decide which immigrants to admit. All countries have that right, don't they? That would be an interesting debate. The Democratic Party and their lackeys in the media don't want to have that debate because they know they would lose. So instead, they try to bully the population into silence.
The GOP argument on immigration isn't one that's optimism-based. It's fear-based.
This is a scare tactic, right? This is the president. This immigration is a scare tactic he's using to rev up his supporters.
When you talk about Caravan, you're talking about white anxiety. You're talking about old white man angst. And so when they bring up the Caravan, that's all we need to do is to bring up the pictures of children being separated from their families.
In other words, shut up, racist. Well, you probably heard that before, too, like every day for the last 2 years. You hear it a lot because it's an effective political tactic, but it only works if you fall for it. You should not fall for it. Most Americans are not racists, not even close. They're decent people. They love their country, they want their country to continue, and they know that will not continue without real borders. Max Burns is spokesman for Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, a group that campaigns on behalf of migration, and he joins us tonight. Thanks a lot, Max, for joining us tonight. So, sort of a macro question first. You acknowledge this is a democracy, and democracies over time probably ought to reflect the will of the people who live within them. The majority of the population overwhelmingly thinks Americans have the right to determine who comes in from other countries. We don't have that right. It's demonstrable. Isn't this anti-democratic, the system that we have now?
I don't know that anyone's arguing that we have to take people in. This is, Tucker, a simple question of enforcing the laws that we already have. I mean, if people like Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush could make the distinction between an immigrant and a refugee, I think it's well within the capability of Congress and the president to make that same distinction today.
But we're not making that distinction. And that's the reason that of the last Caravan, as you just heard, which was several months ago, almost every single member who made it within our borders is still here. We're not enforcing our own laws, and that's why we have upwards of 22 million illegal aliens within our borders. The outline's really simple. We don't have control of who's coming in or out. And it's hard to contest that when the numbers are universally acknowledged. So why is that democratic if most people don't want it?
I think it's strange that the people talking about law and order don't want to enforce, say, the Refugee Act of 1980, which was unanimously passed by the Senate. Unanimity, not something we're used to today. And who don't want to follow the process that's enshrined in our own domestic law to grant at least the application and the right to plead a case for asylum at the border. That's in the law. And the problem is that process is not being followed.
Well, it's not, as you know, and I think your argument is disingenuous because you know, because you work on this issue, that the overwhelming majority of people are released within our country and never go before a judge and just stay here. And again, that's why we have 22 million. So when illegals in this country right now, it's part of the reason. So if you see a migrant caravan coming of people who have no documentation and no right to be here, it's a little concerning when the left says, well, wait a second, we deserve them because we meddled in their countries in the 80s, or we take the drugs they send us. The point that you're making and others on the left are making is this is our punishment.
No,
which is what you
Tucker,
clearly think.
You're a supply and demand conservative. You know that there can't be demand without supply. There can't be supply without demand. It's not like this is a one-way street. These are drugs that we are obsessed with as a nation due to a failed war on drugs. And there is something to be said for the fact that we have created this gang violence, this political instability in Honduras and Guatemala.
We've created it.
Through this addiction we have to drugs, and yet we are so hesitant to acknowledge the human cost that's marching toward us.
No, I guess I'm not hesitant to acknowledge the human cost. I'm struck by your hesitance to acknowledge the over 50,000 Americans who died last year of drug ODs. Where do they figure into this moral equation of yours, where we deserve to be invaded because we take their drugs? What about the families of the 50,000 who died? How much time do you spend thinking about them?
All the time. I think they would be much better served using that money we want to spend on a wall for opioid prevention, opioid education, and to rethink this entire country's addiction to heroin, crystal meth, to marijuana. Come on, Tucker, that's more useful than a wall.
Wait. A wall might stem some of the flood of illegal drugs, not all, but some that would save American lives. But that's not a concern to you because why?
Because these people
You're
are
against
seeking,
the wall because you believe it would work.
Because the people in this caravan are seeking asylum status. They're not drug runners. All the pictures that are up right now on the TV are of them checking in at police stations.
You don't know who they are, actually. You have no idea who they are, and neither do I.
Which is why we have a process for hearing their asylum claim. That's why we have a vetting process.
But the macro point is, why do not, hold on. You know as well as I that a wall would give us some control, physical control over our borders. It works, which is why you hate it. Why would you argue against the right of a sovereign nation to determine who comes in? Why? What is your motive in that, honestly?
I think the drugs, you would agree, are going in under the wall and over the wall and on sea routes, not so much through a point of entry like McAllen, Texas.
I'm not sure we know that, but people are certainly going on foot, and a wall would stop some of them. Why would you oppose that?
There was a report on Fox just the other day of a gigantic air-conditioned drug tunnel with a little mini subway in it. So you can't say that it's not like they haven't figured out how to get around a wall.
Yeah, so you just want to save money. You're just worried about federal expenditures. All right, we're out of time. Max, thank you.
Thank you.
Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, also in California, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thank you very much for coming on. I'm fixated on the moral argument here beneath the policy argument, which is that the United States has no moral standing. The left is saying this. Pelosi said it. The guest I just talked to has said it. We have no moral standing. We have no right to determine who comes into our country because our history is just so bad, so awful, so sinful. What do you make of that argument?
Well, I don't even take it on its own merits, because I don't think they really believe in any consistency. Remember, it was just 30 years ago that the likes of Cesar, it was Cesar Chavez and Bill Clinton and Chuck Schumer.
Who were making the case? Right.
Yes, they were all making the case that the borders should be closed because it adversely impacted minority communities, and that it undermined union wages and entry-level workers. And then when we got 20 million, all of a sudden they said, "Wow, we flipped California, New Mexico, Colorado, Nevada. This is a good thing. Let's ignore federal immigration law." And the same thing with sanctuary cities. They're good now because it fulfills a useful agenda. But believe me, if Alabama and Montana and Utah said, "You know what, in our jurisdictions, in our state, we don't want to adhere to federal orders about gay marriage or the Endangered Species Act or federal handgun registration," then all of a sudden that would be nullification and neo-Confederate in the eyes of the left. It's the Kavanaugh hearings all over again. Remember, in the nanosecond, we were going to throw out 238 years of American jurisprudence because it didn't coincide with an agenda for the Supreme Court. And then afterwards, suddenly the good blue wall electoral college that helped Obama get elected had to be jettisoned because it crumbled and gave Trump the election. And senators were wonderful from small states, the same as big states, because Obama had a supermajority in the Senate, and then that was bad. And the 9 justices were good since 1869, and suddenly they didn't flip like they usually do when a Republican. And so it's whatever is useful. The law is fluid and adaptable. It's about power, Tucker. It's not about the respect for the law and the abstract.
Exactly right. And I think a lot of us, including me very often, are far too literal and take these arguments as if they're sincere, which they are not. Professor, thank you.
Thank you.
Across the country, extremists are attacking candidates for office, but of course only of one party. The media's message is to vote for Democrats anyway, or you're a bad person. Much tape on that as the show continues tonight from the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, California. Welcome back. We're coming to you live tonight from Yorba Linda, California. We're actually in the front lawn of the home Richard Nixon was born in and grew up in. I want to bring you a new video from Houston, Texas. It shows a man being confronted for ripping up Ted Cruz yard signs. It happened in the wealthy liberal neighborhood of Montrose. Be warned, the video is upsetting in that it shows a lunatic in his natural habitat. Here it is.
I would watch, be careful. You know, I have bought 100 of these. I'm about to put more out.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll feel better about this.
I hate Ted Cruz. I hate Ted Cruz. I hate Ted Cruz. I hate Ted Cruz.
Well, we're not licensed veterinarians, but it does seem obvious the zombie raccoon virus is spreading outside of the Northeast, so stay safe. Well, despite plenty of examples of violence and extremism and mob behavior from the left, the media have decided to ban the word mob and coalesce around a new storyline. You better vote Democrat or you're a racist, sexist, or literally a traitor to your country.
Quislings meekly march in lockstep behind a morally disabled president. I don't know how you do it. It's appalling.
People are just trying to make liberals scream and cry, and they laugh about it, right? Like there's a mug that they'll hold up, say liberal tears, and they laugh as they drink it. The cruelty is the point of that.
They voted for the cruel person who demeans and diminishes people.
I don't understand how you overlook misogyny, sexism, racism. I don't understand how you can just sit back and say, you know what? all of that's okay because I'm going to get, all of these judges elected or I'm going to get a tax break. I just think that that's not what it means to be American.
Dan Bongino is a former NYPD officer, NRA TV contributor, author of the book Spygate, The Attempted Sabotage of Donald J. Trump. Dan, thanks a lot for coming on tonight. There's been a shift. So Trump got elected, obviously shocked and horrified a lot of people in Washington and New York. But they, for a while, decided to attack him and not the tens of millions of people who voted for him, not the whole middle of the country. Now they are. Now the idea is it's not just Trump who is bad. It's anyone who might support Trump is bad.
Yeah, this is really an incredible phenomenon. I mean, I've never seen anything like this where the media is playing referee solely for one side. It's like a boxing match where, one side's wearing brass knuckles, we're wearing 20-ounce gloves, and they're yelling at us for a kidney punch or something, Tucker. It's ridiculous, but there's a couple of things going on here. Number one, the leftist freak out is basically due to their coin of the realm is state power. And when they lose state power, they're takers, right? They can't take your money, they can't take your health care. They don't have anything else but aggression, right? Now, the media polices that on the right. Matter of fact, the media even makes up stories about. Was that commentator you showed it? Was she even serious? She's worried about a mug that says liberal tears while Antifa's beating the snot out of people in the. Is that? I mean, I'm serious. Is that a serious comment? Like a mug that says liberal tears, why there's actual people getting the crap beaten out of them in the streets. It's absurd.
I want to show you a piece of tape we just got. I think it's from Portland, Oregon. Otherwise a beautiful city, I have to say. Watch this.
Why are you trying to block me? I'm trying to walk here.
I obey traffic signals.
You're a snarky little idiot. Shut the up.
Try something.
I'm not going to punch you. I'm not like your husband. I'm not going to punch you.
I'm not worried.
I'm not like your boyfriend or your cop boyfriend who's going to knock you out, so don't worry.
My husband died in 9/11.
Good for him. Good. Good. Those NYPD were a bunch of sodomizing immigrants with their bully sticks. So yeah, your husband probably should rot in the grave.
He doesn't know her. She's wearing an NYPD hat, so he starts screaming at her. My husband died on 9/11, she says. Good, he says. What's going on here?
Tucker, Truck 7 of the Emergency Services Unit, the NYPD, was in the precinct I was in the 75th precinct when I was a cop. They lost multiple members running in those buildings on 9/11 to save people's lives. And this piece of human filth, this disgusting, savage animal, has the gall to say this to this woman who may have lost a loved one there on 9/11. I mean, this is grotesque behavior. And Tucker, you and I both know darn well, and thankfully so, that if that was some conservative from some Tea Party group who had done that to a liberal, he would be banned from any news channel, any Republican group, and polite conversation from now until eternity. Where is the left speaking out with a collective voice? As you pointed out before, they used to be the party of civil liberties, right? Saying this kind of stuff is not welcome. Yeah. Let's get back to ideas. And the media has a role in this too, which they've entirely abandoned.
It does seem the closer we get to an election, the more united the press becomes in its mission, which is to carry water for the Democratic Party. I mean, all the kind of pretense falls away, and they just basically are running a continuous 24-hour-a-day commercial for the Democrats.
Tucker, it's a straight-up power play. It's the reason the immigration argument's covered the way it is as well. This was never about compassion for immigrants. It's not about refugees. This is about votes. Of course not. They lost votes amongst working-class people, and they're trying to make it up with illegal immigrant votes. This has always been the play.
Yeah. If they cared, they'd be concerned about the tens of thousands of Americans dying every year of drug ODs, but they don't. Dan, great to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Well, if you're conservative, you probably grew up believing the government might be the biggest threat to free expression. Turns out it's not. Big tech, which is more powerful than the government, is. Could Republicans in the Congress take action to protect the public from their influence while they still hold the House? We'll ask one congressman next. Freedom of speech is under threat in this country because the people who hold power have stopped seeing the value of it and other constitutional rights, not to mention the Constitution itself, that is all described, the sad and yet riveting story in a new book called Ship of Fools, still on sale. Well, the ominous tech monopoly Google recently announced it will not work with the U.S. Pentagon on a defense project due to ethical concerns. That problem has not arisen as they work hard to build a censored search engine to help the fascist Chinese government repress its own people. But private messages from Google employees obtained by this program show Google's refusal to help national defense in this country may be for the best. In 2016, shortly after the presidential election, a one-time Google employee called Brian Klimt wrote this, quote, "If the government wants a company to build some software for unethical purposes, we should volunteer to do it. I'd gladly take project management responsibility for such a thing. I promise the deadlines will slip for decades and will never produce anything remotely functional." In other words, he would sabotage it. A Google engineer called Javier Estevez responded by linking to a CIA document giving tips for, quote, simple sabotage. Another engineer called Gary Boyer seemed to like the idea, but lamented their strategy would have to remain hidden. Estevez and Boyer still work at Google. We reached out to the company, which commented this way, quote, "What employees say in their personal capacity has no bearing on the way we build or operate our products." They didn't apologize. They didn't explain. Meanwhile, Twitter announced yesterday it won't be banning or even suspending Louis Farrakhan after he made a post that compared Jews to termites. As we've often noted, we don't have a problem with free speech. We support it strongly. We just wish Twitter would extend the same courtesy to people who aren't Democratic stalwarts like Louis Farrakhan. Last month, Twitter took part in the coordinated purge of Alex Jones and InfoWars from multiple online platforms. Twitter suspended many other accounts for reasons it won't fully explain, but which appear to be political. We're against that, of course. The question is, can Congress do something about it as well? Congressman Jim Jordan represents Ohio, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks very much for coming on.
You bet.
Before I ask you about Twitter, I want to ask you what you make of these internal messages from Google that show Google employees apparently joking about sabotaging a Department of Defense project. What does that tell you about how they view the U.S. government and this country?
It shows you how ridiculous the left has become. Limit conservative speech, sabotage national defense, allow anti-Semitic language on your platforms, but restrict conservative speech. I mean, the left, I said this the other day, the left will applaud Colin Kaepernick when he disrespects the flag. They'll cheer on Cuomo when he says America's never that great. And they'll applaud Maxine Waters when she says go out and harass people who support the president. And yet they allow Louis Farrakhan's speech, but restrict conservatives. I mean, this is the ridiculous level we have now gotten to, the absurd level I think we've now gotten to in this country, and it's unfortunate.
Well, it's certainly dark, that's for sure. So Twitter it is the portal through which a lot of people get their news. I mean, it's not just a social medium, it's an important part of our news landscape, and they are obviously political in the way they censor. Does Congress have a role in that?
Well, I think they are political. You know, there are 435 members of the House, 100 members of the Senate, 535. This summer, 4 got shadow banned. Devin Nunes, Matt Gaetz, Mark Meadows, and Jim Jordan. 4 conservative members of the House. And of course, CEO Jack Dorsey said, well, it was just a problem, just a glitch in our algorithm. I mean, think about that. So what'd you put in the algorithm? The names Gaetz, Meadows, Nunes, Jordan? I mean, come on, there is no way that is the answer. So this is where we've got, Tucker, we're doing a series of hearings on the First Amendment in the Oversight Committee. And at our most recent one, I asked this college professor, he was a witness for the Democrats. I asked this college professor, I said, on a college campus safe space, could I say this sentence, Donald Trump is president? He began his response with these words, it depends. And I interrupted him. I said, it depends. It's a fact. He got elected November 8, 2016. He was sworn in January 2017. He lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. There's no it depends about it. This is the level of absurdity the left is taking us to, and it is a direct attack on the First Amendment.
But I mean, these companies are more powerful in their technology than the U.S. government. The U.S. government has nothing as powerful as Google, nothing as close. They control our national conversation. They have a chokehold on all human information in English. So why doesn't the U.S. Congress see their clampdown on speech as a threat to all American citizens? I mean, can we do something about this, or do we stand idly by?
No, I think you're right, but I think it's a multiple-step process, and we're at step one, which is we first need to understand how serious this problem is, how big it is. Is it every single social media platform? There's certainly lots of examples. You mentioned Google. We know what Twitter has done. We know what Jack Dorsey has said. So let's have the hearings. Let's get to the bottom of it. And then you're right. We may have to take action to protect the First Amendment and protect people's ability to speak out in a conservative fashion and not be hindered for doing so.
Yeah, or a liberal fashion, but to speak. I mean, the First Amendment doesn't mean anything if you can't exercise it.
No, right. I mean, the First Amendment wasn't written just for speech we like. It was written for all speech. But right now, it doesn't seem they allow liberal and they allow all kinds of crazy things to be said, as the Farrakhan example is such crazy language like that. But they're going to restrict conservatives and their ability to speak. It's just not right, and it's something we're going to have to look into.
Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, thank you very much.
I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle from Washington. And boy, do we have a show for you tonight. Texas Senator Ted Cruz will be here in moments to respond to his opponent, Beto O'Rourke, who spoke out at a town hall just moments ago. Plus, his reaction to the growing caravan making its way toward our border. Congressman Devin Nunes is here, and he has details of a Democratic operative who harassed him and who was later arrested for assaulting a GOP campaign worker in Nevada. Wait till you hear what this group is affiliated with and this person comes from. And just 18 days out from the midterm elections, Eric Trump is also here, and he's going to tell us why he says it's a good thing his father is the most important factor this election season. But first, the caravan of lies and manipulation. That's the focus of tonight's angle. As we approach Election Day, here's one thing that has become patently obvious. Democrats are uninterested in the things Americans care about most: their prosperity and their safety. Instead of policy prescriptions, Democrats poison American discourse with constant demonization and perpetual intimidation. And in the Kavanaugh saga, we saw that they're masters at producing coordinated, choreographed outrage. After that backfired, Democrats began to panic. Although still favored to take the House of Representatives, things began to shift somewhat after the Kavanaugh dust settled. Stories suddenly began to pop up that Pelosi and Schumer and company were concerned that Latino voters weren't sufficiently enthusiastic in the midterms, which, of course, could doom Democrat chances to take the House. Then, like magic, a few days later, a story appeared out of nowhere about another caravan of Central Americans headed to the U.S. from Honduras.
No lo va a detener. Solo Dios no puede detener. Donald Trump no es nadie. Solo porque sea presidente de Estados Unidos, no lo va a detener.
La situación es bien dura aquí porque no hay trabajo. No hay trabajo y necesitamos trabajo.
A former Honduran left-wing politician even joined the caravan for a time before he was arrested. So what started as a group of 1,600 soon became 2,000 and then 4,000 and apparently growing. Meanwhile, crusading reporters are feeding the narrative that anyone opposed to welcoming these caravanners into our country are cruel, horrible, awful, rotten people.
So what is the GOP strategy? We see it at this point as to push fear and loathing. If you don't vote, the scary people from the South are coming for you. And you see that picture? That's what they want you to think all immigrants look like. People laying on the floor, splayed out, not as civilized as you, different from you.
The media's over-the-top slurs against those of us who believe that the system must change and that our border has to be protected, it speaks volumes about their bias and their real motivation. Of course, which is to help Democrats like presidential hopeful Julian Castro.
The president continues to fearmonger around the issue of immigration. One of the worst things that's happened in these last 18 months has been the basically state-sponsored child abuse of young kids at the border. This example today of what he says is a caravan, he's picking that and he's trying to make an issue of it to gin up his base. I think that the American people can see through that.
You know what the American people see through? Democrats' phony compassion, politically timed, in a desperate attempt to turn out Latino voters who themselves are seeing the wonders of the Trump economy, record low unemployment, and the best economy in decades. Now, Castro was mayor of San Antonio, and his twin brother, Joaquin, he represents San Antonio in Congress. But I've never seen either of them on television standing for the families of those brutally murdered by illegal aliens, brutally hurt by rape, spousal abuse, child abuse, and as I said, even murder.
Today, crime scene tape, boarded up doors, and broken glass are still outside this apartment on Jones-Maltzberger Road. It was here just yesterday, where firefighters found a badly burned body. Police arrested and charged 20-year-old Ernesto Esquivel Garcia with murder, arson, and abuse of a corpse. News 4 San Antonio has learned U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is now a part of this investigation.
Now, ICE was apparently involved from the very beginning in this story, even before the gruesome murder. Now, back in 2017, Garcia was arrested for a DWI and a misdemeanor criminal mischief after he reportedly rammed his truck into the cars of an ex-girlfriend and her family members. He got an immigration judge, though, to give him a voluntary departure order. Now, would you be surprised to hear that he didn't leave the country voluntarily after that order? A few months later, he was in ICE custody a second time. And a second time, he was given a voluntary departure order. And now, in just 11 days, he awaits his trial for the murder of Jared Vargas. And why aren't any of the Democrats who rail against family separations also railing about stories like this? 55 illegal immigrants found stuffed in a truck, ready to be shipped across the United States. Undoubtedly many to unscrupulous employers. Our open borders, as well as our immigration and asylum loopholes, are enriching the cartels, they're endangering migrants, and they're also making life worse for most Americans beyond the super rich who live in a protected bubble. So how can we allow this to continue and still be a country? Now, of course, not all illegal immigrants commit violent crime, and many are good and hardworking people. But that's not really the point. No American should suffer or be brutalized in order to fulfill the Democrats' fantasy of a borderless society. No American worker should see his or her wages go down because there's an illegal immigrant who just arrived in the U.S. who's willing to work for 40% less. In Donald Trump, we finally have a president who wants to tackle this problem, not just pass it on to the next president the way Obama did. And don't buy for a moment what the left is selling you. Democrats are the ones using this and stoking false fear among the Latinos to try to flip Congress. Again, no ideas, just more emotional manipulation. We welcome and we treasure the Hispanic immigrants in this country who came here the legal way, like Tia from Venezuela, who called into my radio show today.
I was born in Venezuela. I am a proud American citizen now, but I am terrified of what is happening. My mother would have never thought that Venezuela, 30 years later, was going to be a socialist country. And then 5, 8 years after that, was going to descend into a dictatorship. Because once they get in, they change the Constitution, and now they're not even waiting. They want the Supreme Court because they want to change the Constitution, and there goes our country.
There goes our country. We get a lot of those calls on the radio, legal immigrants enraged. Now, we all know the negative changes that open borders and catch and release bring to America. Look no further than to California's rampant homelessness, filthy streets, ballooning welfare programs, crushing regulations. That's what a Democrat supermajority sanctuary state ends up looking like. The president is standing up for you. He wants this to stop. And this morning he tweeted, "We spend billions enforcing other countries' borders as our own has become a joke. Our laws ignored and our generation and compassion exploited. He said it as well. He said, in addition to stopping all payments to these countries, which seem to have almost no control over their population, I must, in the strongest of terms, ask Mexico to stop this onslaught. And if they're unable to do so, I will call up the U.S. military and close our southern border. That's what his tweet said. Now, the Democrats taking the House will ensure that this caravan of 4,000 eventually becomes a flow of 4 million plus before we know it. This cannot happen. But as we told you last night, if you're still on the fence about what to do on November 6th in the midterm election, just think for a moment about who's in line to chair the important committees when it comes to these issues, like Homeland Security and the Judiciary Committees if the Democrats do take the House. Benny Thompson from Mississippi would take Homeland Security.
You would think the most important Homeland Security problem facing the nation is a handful of Central Americans moving through Mexico. That does not make it so. Better to distract the American people from the real issues facing the department and perhaps from the president's own problems too.
Oh, and meanwhile, Jerry Nadler would oversee Judiciary, which includes immigration and border security. And we know he's far more interested in investigating Justice Kavanaugh than solving our border problem. Come on. Hispanic Americans are smart enough to spot a con when they see one. So I say it's time to walk away from the Democrats' cynical game of identity politics and emotional manipulation and toward candidates whose policies result in higher wages and better security for all Americans. And that's the angle.
Michelle always says that, when they go low, we go high. No. When they go low, we kick them.
It seems that some Democrats have been taking suggestions like that from Eric Holder quite literally. A hostile Democratic operative with ties to George Soros and a long history of harassing Republicans has been arrested for battery against the female campaign manager of a GOP candidate. For details on this, we're joined by Fox News correspondent Trace Gallagher. Trace.
Hey, Laura, the man in question is Wilfred M. Stark III, known very well on Capitol Hill as Mike Stark. He was arrested in Las Vegas for assaulting Kristen Davison, the campaign manager for Nevada GOP gubernatorial nominee Adam Laxalt. Davison says Mike Stark grabbed her and yanked her arm and refused to let go. She told authorities the attack left her traumatized and horrified, but for Mike Stark, it might have been another day at the office. He's a reporter for American Bridge 21st Century, a liberal organization founded by David Brock, who also founded the liberal watchdog group Media Matters, and funded by billionaire George Soros, famous for giving money to liberal political causes. After Stark was arrested, American Bridge fired him for his bad behavior, but sources say they also hired him for his bad behavior. Con Carroll, the communications director for Utah Republican Senator Mike Lee, told Fox News that during the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, Stark followed, filmed, and harassed Senator Lee in the basement of the Senate building. Carroll also tweeted, quote, "I've known Mike Stark for literally over a decade. This is who he is. American Bridge knows who he is and what he does, and they hired him accordingly." In fact, sources tell Fox News that when Stark was arrested for assault in Vegas, he told police that this was, quote, his job, and he does this for a living. That prompted Kentucky Senator Rand Paul to question whether American Bridge was propagating this, quoting, "Soros paid protester arrested. Same group operates inside congressional office buildings. Are Democrats paying to incite violence?" And Stark's resume highlights a violent past. He was convicted for disorderly conduct after aggressively approaching Virginia GOP gubernatorial candidate Ed Gillespie back in 2017. And earlier this year, he was arrested for assaulting a female staffer for Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. American Bridge has not responded to whether it knew about Stark's criminal past. Laura.
Trace, thanks so much. And California Congressman and House Intel Chairman Devin Nunes was also harassed by this man just a few months earlier. Congressman Nunes joins us now. Congressman, now, how long was this Stark guy bothering you, and have there been any others harassing you in a similar manner? Because this is the new tactic of the Democrats. Get in your face, hope to, provoke you, get an inch from your face or a centimeter from your face, and then see what flies.
Yeah, they've been doing this to me and many of my colleagues, Laura, for the better part of a year and a half. Anybody who was involved in the Russia investigation at all, we were harassed. This guy in particular actually went to our office numerous times. He would follow me in. He'd get in my face. He'd show up at committee hearings. He even showed up at a place downtown in Washington where I was giving a speech one time. And including, he actually showed up at the airport one time. And so we had to have the Capitol Police come several times because he would harass me, he'd harass our staff. And look, this is not the way we should operate here in the United States of America. People should be frightened of this. Nobody's going to want to do these jobs if you have to deal with guys like this, right? Like for me, I'm fine, like I'll fight back. But look at how many people that maybe are thinking of becoming a judge or Supreme Court judge or run for office. With these lunatics running around like this, funded by billionaires who should know better, this is not the type of activity we want to see in this country.
Well, when you say you're going to fight back, that's the point, though, right? You really can't unless they touch you. If they touch you, if they can just grab your hand, that's an assault. So then, if you're in legitimate fear of your life, you can respond. No, look. I mean, if someone ever comes up to my family or touches one of my kids, good luck. I mean, Mother Tiger comes out, but it's not gonna happen. Okay, so it doesn't bother. I mean, people like get in my face to just go ahead. I mean, I have plenty of plenty of jokes that I can throw back at you. But you're right. This is meant to intimidate people who might not, be like you and I, away from politics altogether. And George Soros, we cannot underestimate the power of his billions of dollars funneling through these David Brock groups and run by David Brock, whether it's the Media Matters group or whether it's this American Bridge group. At some point, is it time to investigate their 501c3 or 501c4 status? I mean, is this the type of legitimate speech, or is this just targeted harassment?
Well, look, this gets to the heart of campaign finance reform. We last had that under George W. Bush at the beginning of his term. And what this has led to is absolute chaos where billionaires can come in and feed these guys. So does something need to be done about this? Yes. But, unfortunately, the Republicans, we're not going to get involved in that type of behavior. And I think the Democrats, until they're taught a lesson, they're not going to change. They see this working. They see their protesting, their harassment, all of this. They see it as working. And I hope it backfires this fall. And I think a lot of people are slowly waking up to the fact that this is not the type of behavior we should have in our political system.
Well, you live in a beautiful state. California is a beautiful state, but it basically has a supermajority Democrat control of the state legislature. Obviously, all the senators, governor, at least for now. The rest of the country, what do we need to learn from California? Because people say what happens in California will come to your state eventually.
Yeah.
So what shouldn't people want other than the beach and the beautiful agriculture and all of that and the mountains and so forth? But what else don't the American people want?
Well, what you're seeing happen in California today, Laura, is you're seeing massive homelessness. So because of our weather, because we don't arrest people, because we don't put them in jail, because we let them get away with everything, we have massive homelessness all over this state. And it's really people who are, it's sad because they're burnt out on drugs. They've got a lot of mental problems.
And a lot of illegal immigrants on the streets, correct? There are a lot of illegal immigrants in a lot of the tent villages as well in LA and so forth.
Well, it's tough to know who they are or whether they're legal or not legal, but I will tell you that when you get to it's not, people think that it's just San Francisco and they hear about the feces on the street, which is absolutely disgusting, and it's true, but you see it all over California in any city or town that you go to or visit.
Congressman, before we let you go, apparently some of your opponents think it's really funny to put signs around your district written in Russian. Okay? Nunez должен uйти. So Nunez должен уйти means Nunez got to go, basically. That's what that says. I speak Russian, so I can translate the signs for you, but I'm not sure most people in your district are understanding the Russian. So I think the joke is I'm not sure the joke is actually going to be very effective there.
Well, I think the point on that, those signs that the people need to understand is those are also being put up by the same people that are funding this Stark character. So the billionaires are funding protesters, they're funding movements, they're funding crazy billboards. The best part about that billboard, though, is I have a 98-year-old grandmother who has our family farm here, lives on it. She's been harassed by reporters and other wackos that have shown up at her house. She lives by herself. And the other day she told me that she was driving down the freeway and she saw some of those signs. She actually thought they were mine. So I think to some degree they're benefiting me to some degree.
Yeah, that's not a bad picture of you, Congressman. I take all the FaceTime you can get there on the billboards. All right, Congressman, we got through a whole interview and we didn't even talk about Rod Rosenstein not one time. So I think that's got to be a record with you. But we'll await it next time. Congressman, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, despite not being on the ballot, the 28 midterms are all about President Trump. Eric Trump is here next on why he thinks that that's the best scenario possible. Don't go away.